Where the Flame Trees Bloom by Alma Flor Ada. The Teacher. My mother's mother, my grandmother Dolores, was known as Lola. She filled my early years with outdoor adventures, fun, and fascinating stories. The deeds of the Greek gods and goddesses, the heroic feats of the Cuban patriots were as immediate to me as her everyday life at the two schools where she was principal. An elementary public school during the day, and a school for working women in the evenings. It is not surprising that there are many stories in our family about this woman, who was both an intellectual and a practical person, who cut her hair and shortened her skirts before any other woman in our town, who created a literary journal, founded schools, awakened a great passion in the poet who married her, and brought up 5 children as well as several nieces and nephews while directing her own schools and farm. One of my favorite stories about her was told to me at various times by my mother and my aunts Myrna and Virginia, since all 3 of them were present when the events took place. Unlike many other family stories, which are often changed or embellished depending on the teller, I have always heard this story told exactly the same way. Perhaps that is because the story itself is too powerful to be embellished, or because the events impressed themselves so vividly upon the memories of those present. My grandmother Lola loved to teach outdoors. The slightest pretext would serve to take the whole class out under the trees to conduct her lessons there. This particular story took place during one of those outdoor lessons, at a time when she and her husband, my grandfather Medardo, ran a boarding school on the hacienda she had inherited from her father, and where later I would be born. Surrounded by her pupils, including 3 of her own daughters, my grandmother was conducting a grammar lesson. Suddenly she interrupted herself. "Why is it," she asked her students, "that we don't often speak about the things that are truly important, about our responsibility as human beings for those around us? Do we really know their feelings, their needs? And yet we could all do so much for each other." The students were silent, spellbound. They knew their teachers sometimes strayed from the topic of the lesson in order to share with them her own reflections, and they also knew that those were some of her most important lessons. At times she could be funny and witty. Other times she would touch their hearts, and so they listened. "Look," continued my grandmother as she pointed to the road that bordered the farm. There the students saw a solitary man walking. "Look at that old man. He is walking by us. In a few minutes he will be gone forever, and we will never have known who he is, where he is going, what may be important in his life." The students watched the man, who by then was quite close. He was very thin, and a coarse guayabera hung loosely over his bent frame. His face, in the shade of a straw hat, was weathered and wrinkled. "Well," said my grandmother, "do we let him go away, forever unknown, or do you want to ask him if there is anything we can do for him?" The students looked at one another. Finally, one girl said, "Shall I ask him?" As my grandmother nodded, the girl got up and walked toward the road. A few of the other students followed her, my mother and my aunts among them. Upon seeing them approach, the man stopped. "We would like to know who you are and where you are going," said the student. "Is there anything we can do for you?" added my aunt Mireya. The man was completely taken aback. "But who are you?" was all he could reply. The girls then explained how their questions had come about. The old man looked at them. He told them that he had no one to be with, that he had come a long distance hoping to find some distant relatives, but had been unable to locate them. "I am nothing but an old man," he concluded, "looking for a place to lie down and die. As a matter of fact, I was headed towards that large ciaba." He pointed to a large tree growing by the road not too far away. I thought I'd lie down in its shade to wait for my death. "Please don't leave," was all the girls could say. They rushed back to tell their teacher what they had learned from the old man, that he truly intended to just lie down and die. "What do you think can be done?" my grandmother asked. The boys and girls came up with ideas. The old man could go to an old folks' home. Maybe he should be taken to the hospital. Or perhaps the police would know what to do. "Is that what you would like to happen if it were you?" my grandmother asked. Instead, the children took the man into the house. He was given a room. The students made the bed and cooked him some food. A doctor determined that there was nothing wrong with him except exhaustion and malnutrition. It took him several days to recuperate, but soon he was up and about. He lived on with the family for many years, until one morning he was found to have died peacefully in his sleep. During all those years he helped in the garden, fed the hens, or often sat on the back porch whistling softly. But there was nothing he liked better than to sit in the back of the classroom or out under the trees and listen to my grandmother teach.